Hello, everyone. Today is Wednesday, October 2nd, and this is the Daily News Currents. For today, we have why Mount Everest is growing taller each year, port workers strike on East and Gulf Coast, Adams accuses prosecutors of leaking investigation details to news media, 5 things to know about Mexico's first female president, and the pipeline of deadly fentanyl into the U.S. may be drying up, experts say. Why Mount Everest is growing taller every year. Researchers say that two rivers merged some 89,000 years ago and gave the mightiest peak in the Himalayas a huge growth spurt. Mount Everest is many things. It's called Chomolungma in Tibetan and Sagarmatha in Nepali. It is an iconic part of Earth's topography and potentially lethal climbing challenge and a geologic marvel. It is also staggeringly tall, and with a peak of 29,032 feet above sea level, it easily achieves the status of the world's tallest mountain by about 800 feet over the Himalayan peaks like K2, Kangchenjunga, and Lotos. What gave Everest its height advantage and contributes to making it grow taller by millimeters every year. Research published on Monday in the journal Nature Geoscience points to a surprising cause: a river stolen long ago by another murdering waterway. Rivers are agents of erosion, but their consumption of land can have unexpected effects. About 89,000 years ago, a powerful river annexed another one nearby. Combined with two, grew more erosive. This led to the washing away of far more of the Himalayan landscape, and a huge weight was shorn from the crust, the layer of earth we live on. This lightweight crust, the study says, was able to float more easily atop the underlying mantle layer. Ultimately, this has added anywhere from 50 to 165 feet to the height of Everest, serving as a reminder that nothing, not even a colossal pyramid of rock, is immutable. Although mountains may appear to stand still from the perspective of a human lifetime, they are in fact constantly in motion, said Jin Zhendai, a geoscientist at the China University of Geosciences in Beijing, who is an author of the study. Although this explanation can account only for a part of Everest's additional height, scientists see it as a step towards accounting for how the mountain grew to what it now is. It is a really neat story, and one that makes a lot of sense, said Ton Jernan, a geoscientist at the University of Southampton in England, who was not involved with the new work. Everest began to form around 45 million years ago, when the tectonic plate in India crashed into the Eurasia plate, and then started descending below it. The crust buckled and crumbled into gargantuan scale, creating the Himalayas. Earth's crust may seem rigid, but it's not. When something massive like an ice sheet or a mountain range weighs down the crust, it flexes downward, but the mantle below is buoyant, nudging the sagging crust upwards. It's as if the Himalayas are standing on a bouncy castle, said Adam Smith, a geoscientist at University College London in England, who was the author of the new study. When the crust neither rises nor sinks, it's referred to as being in an isostatic equilibrium, and Everest should be in that state. Material is always being scraped off the Indian plate and added to the mountain range as the plate plunges downwards. Rock is also being removed from the mountain's exposed surfaces by precipitation and the grinding movement of glaciers. These forces should balance each other, and Everest should neither shrink nor grow, but Everest's superlative height suggests that something has been putting its thumb on the tectonic plates, and there is nothing better at creating an imbalance than a rock-eating river. In Everest's shadows lies the Arun River, and just as Everest outgrew the other Himalayan peaks, the Arun distinguishes itself from neighboring waterways. The Arun takes a suspiciously circuitous route. It runs along the northern Himalayas and then turns abruptly and cuts through a ridge near Everest that suggests the upward and lower segments of the river were not always unified, and that something significant forced them to become one. Reproducing the region's myriad rivers in computer simulations, the researchers identified that big moment. Some 89,000 years ago, a river network, the Kosi, cut back into the Himalayas, eventually reaching the Arun, plunging its water and merging with it. The Himalayas were no match for this rock-eroding liquid behemoth. The gossamer crust was pushed skywards by the buoyant mantle sea. Various peaks were uplifted, and Everest gained up to 165 extra feet in the blink of a geological eye. The tallest mountain on Earth is still growing, by about the width of a strand of a spaghetti each year. A combination of factors, including the crustal rebound, explains these gains, but its growth spurt probably won't continue forever. The balance could tip in the other way, shading some of Everest's great height. The Himalayas will rise and fall as all mountain ranges do. The rocky skin of the dynamic planet is never stationary. On timescales, Mr. Smith said, it's almost as if the Earth is breathing. Port workers strike on East and Gulf Coast. Members of the International Longshoremen Association walked out for the first time since 1977 in a standoff over wages, benefits, and job security. For the first time in nearly 50 years, longshoremen on the East and Gulf Coast went on strike Tuesday, a move that cut off most trade through some of the busiest U.S. ports and could send a chill through the economy. Members of the International Longshoremen Association Union, or ILA, which represents roughly 45,000 workers, started setting up pickets after 11th-hour talks failed to avert a work stoppage. Nothing is going to move without us, nothing, said Harold J. Daggett, the president of the union, addressing picketers outside a port terminal in Elizabeth, New Jersey, in a video posted earlier Tuesday to a union Facebook account. But in a sign that the union and the group representing port employees might be getting closer to a deal, Mr. Daggett told CNBC on Tuesday morning the union was now seeking raises that add up to 61.5% over a 6-year contract, down from the 77% the union had asked for earlier in negotiations. The United States Maritime Alliance, which represents port employers, said on Monday that its latest offer had included raises of nearly 50%. The group declined to comment on Tuesday. In addition to wage increases, the use of new technology in the ports has been a sticking point for the union. On Tuesday morning, Mr. Daggett's son, Dennis A. Daggett, who is an ILA executive vice president, was a part of a large picket line outside the port terminal of Bayonne, New Jersey. He said that morale was phenomenal and that the union was going to keep pushing for better wages. The raises we had in our previous contract, inflation really ate into them, he said in an interview, and he declined to say how big the increase the union has asked for in recent talks. Businesses now face a period of uncertainty. Trade experts say that a short strike could cause little lasting damage, but that a weeks-long stoppage could lead to shortages, higher prices, and even layoffs. When we talk about our 2 to 3 week strike, said J. Bruce Chan, a transportation analyst at Stifel, a Wall Street firm, that's when the problem starts to get exponentially worse. The prospect of significant economic damage from a strike puts President Biden at a quandary 5 weeks before national elections. Before the strike, he said he was not going to use federal labor law, the 1947 Taft-Hartley Act, to force an end to the port shutdown, something President George W. Bush did in 2002. But some labor experts say he might use that power if the strike started to weigh on the economy. Michael Vigneron, president of the ILA's Atlantic Coast District, who was also at the bayonet picket, said he hoped the president would not use the law. We hope that we have this settled before that, he said. That's the goal here, to get a contract. Longshoremen move containers off ships, sort them, and put them on trucks or trains, and handle bulk cargo too. About 3/5 of the nation's container shipments go through ports on the East and Gulf Coast, including the Port of New York and New Jersey, the third busiest in the country, and the fast-growing ports of Virginia, Georgia, and Texas. A strike will also stop the shipment of cars and heavy machinery through the Port of Baltimore, where operations were curtailed for most of the spring after a container ship crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Automakers said that they were monitoring the strike, but that it was too early to say how it would hit them. Cruise ship operations are unaffected by the strike, and military shipments will continue. Rick Cotton, the executive director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, said on Monday that around 100,000 containers would be stored at the port during the strike, and that 35 ships arriving over the next week would be anchored offshore. The stakes are very high, Governor Kathy Hochul of New York said at the news conference on Monday. The potential for disruption is significant, but she also sought to calm consumers, saying shortages of food and pharmaceutical products were not expected. For bringing large amounts of goods in and out of the country, there's no practical alternative to ports, and ports cannot operate without longshoremen, giving them strong leverage in labor negotiations. West Coast ports are open. Longshoremen there belong to a different union and agreed last year on a new contract that includes a significant increase in wages. Under the contract that expired on Monday, longshoremen on the East and Gulf Coast earned a top rate of $39 an hour. The ILA had initially sought a $5 an hour raise in each of the 6 years of the new agreement, which would add up to 77% over the life of the contract. The Employers Alliance has started negotiations offering raises of $2.50 an hour every year. The two sides had barely communicated for months before the walkout, but in recent days, the Maritime Alliance on Monday it had traded counteroffers related to wages with the LIA and offered to extend the contract. Dennis Daggett, the ILA official, said focusing on the $39 top wage would be misleading because longshoremen with less than 6 years of experience earn about half that sum per hour. He said the union was determined to secure higher wages for newer workers in its next contract. With overtime and shift work, many longshoremen earn well over $100,000 a year, putting them ahead of other workers without a college degree. But they say they put in far more hours than workers in other jobs earning similar amounts, and do so in often harsh or dangerous conditions. The high inflation of the last few years has reduced their wages' purchasing power, and longshoremen contend that they have a right to a slice of the increased profits that their employers, some of which are large global shipping lines, made during the pandemic trade boom in 2021 and 2022. Knowing that a strike was possible, many companies rushed in merchandise before Tuesday, including most of the durable consumer goods that they intend to sell during the holiday sales period. But even a short strike could hurt importers of perishable fruits like fruits. Daniel J. Barbino, Chief Operating Officer at Top Banana, a fruit distributor based in the Hunts Point produce market in the Bronx, New York, said a strike could cause him to run out of bananas, his main product, by the end of the week. It's going to be everyone in the region, all the banana importers. Nobody's going to have fruit, he said. Mr. Barabino said the shipping fruit by air was too costly, and he couldn't make up the shortfall with sales of produce other than bananas. They pay the coffee bill, maybe the bottled water bill, he said, but they're not paying the electric bill, the rent, the truck leases, or the employee salaries. The ILA walked out across all East and Gulf Coast ports in 1977, snarling container shipping for more than 6 weeks. The deal that ended the strike included wage raises well above those proposed by employees, increased contributions to pension plans that took steps to address the ILA's concern that new technology could cause job losses. The union is still fighting automation. It broke off talks with the Maritime Alliance in June, saying a port in Mobile, Alabama, was checking trucks using technology that was not authorized under its labor contract. The technology had been used in the port opened in 2008, a source familiar with the operation said. Under the expired contract, port operators were permitted to use semi-automatic technology, but not equipment devoid of human interaction. The alliance said it had offered in recent talks to carry that commitment into the new contract. On Tuesday, Dennis Daggett was standing outside the most automated terminal in New Jersey, Port Liberty Bay, operated by CMA CGM, a large shipping company based in Marseille, France. He said the non-automated container crates in the port of New York and New Jersey could be more productive than the semi-automatic equipment in Port Liberty. CMA CGM did not respond to a request for comment. Recently, other unions have gotten much of what they asked for in recent negotiations. Labor experts say that ILA was hoping to capitalize on that winning run. The union has shown its fighting hearts at Harley Scheiken, a professor emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley, who specializes in labor and trade. The employer association is well aware that the border environment is that strikes have delivered for unions in the last year or so. Adams accuses prosecutors of leaking investigation details to news media. In a court filing Tuesday morning, lawyers for Mayor Eric Adams asked a judge to hold a hearing about what they said were grand jury secrecy violations. Lawyers for Mayor Eric Adams accused federal prosecutors of leaking information about the investigation that led to the mayor's indictment last week, and asked the judge presiding over the case to hold a hearing and issue sanctions, according to the Tuesday morning court filing. In the filing, one of Mr. Adams' lawyers, Alex Spiro, refers to several articles in the New York Times that over the past year have reported on the scope and progress of the investigation. The reports, Mr. Adams' lawyers argue in the filing, prejudiced the public against the mayor. By the time that the charges against Mayor Adams were unsealed on September 26, 2024, most of the details on the indictment and the evidence underpinning the government case, weak as it is, had already been widely reported to the national and local press, the filing says. The filing on Tuesday came 5 days after federal prosecutors announced the indictment against Mr. Adams, and 1 day after his lawyers asked the court to dismiss a bribery charge against him. And it was the start of what is likely to be a long legal battle, in which a sitting mayor of New York City has been charged with crimes for the first time in modern history. The face of calls for his resignation by other New York politicians, Mr. Adams has been fighting for his political life, visiting churches over the weekend and holding news conferences to shore up support. Governor Kathy Hochul, who has the power to remove the mayor, has not moved to do so. The identities of the private citizens who serve on grand juries are sealed, and they, prosecutors and other court officials, are legally prohibited from disclosing deliberations like those that led to the mayor's indictment last week. The rules cover only information presented to grand jurors while they're impaneled. The article at the heart of Tuesday's filing had made the contours of the inquiry apparent before the indictment. The Times reported over the course of the past year that Mr. Adams' phone had been seized, that the FBI was investigating whether Mr. Adams had cleared red tape for the Turkish government in exchange for airline upgrades and other perks, and that Mr. Adams' dealing with other countries were also being examined. These and several other articles cited in the court filing were based on the accounts of people with knowledge of the matters who spoke to the Times on the condition that their names not be published. Most egregiously, on September 25th, before the indictment was unsealed, and even before the mayor's counsel was notified of the indictment, the New York Times reported that the mayor has been indicted on a federal corruption investigation, people with knowledge of the matter said. Mr. Spiro wrote in a letter to Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, whose office is prosecuting the case. The 5-count indictment against Mr. Adams was unsealed the day after the article was published. Requests for leak investigations are seldom granted, but in Tuesday's filing, Mr. Adams' lawyers argued that only 3 groups of people could have known that the mayor had been indicted before the charges were publicly unsealed: the prosecutors, the grand jurors, and the court staff members who processed the indictment. Of the 3 groups, only the prosecution team would have been privy to the government's plan to announce additional details the next day. The government has shown an appalling disregard for Mayor Adams' rights and the grand jury's secrecy provisions, Mr. Spiro wrote. Officials at the Southern District did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The Manhattan prosecutors charged Mr. Adams with bribery, conspiracy, fraud, and soliciting illegal foreign campaign donations from the Turkish government. Prosecutors said that for years, Mr. Adams accepted luxury travel and benefits worth more than $100,000, as well as an illegal campaign contribution. In exchange for gifts, prosecutors said Mr. Adams granted favors to Turkey using his political position, including pressure of fire department officials to approve new high-rise Turkish consulate buildings in Midtown Manhattan while he was mayor-elect. Mr. Adams has vehemently denied the allegations and has said he will not resign. He pleaded not guilty to all 5 charges in federal court on Friday. In a news conference on Monday, Mr. Spiro said the charges were not a real case. He argued that the indictment had criminalized activities that are routine for politicians. New Yorkers will see through this, he said. Mr. Adams is scheduled to be in court on Wednesday for his first hearing before a federal judge who has been assigned to the case, Dalai A. Ho. 5 things to know about Mexico's first female president. Claudia Sheinbaum, an environmental scientist and former mayor of Mexico City, takes office on Tuesday as Mexico's 66th president and its first female leader. Sheinbaum, who won the election in June in a landslide, assumes the presidency amid high expectations and enormous challenges, including endemic cartel violence and a large national deficit. The political protege of popular ongoing President Andre Manuel Lopez Obrador, Sheinbaum has a reputation for being analytical, disciplined, and unflappable. She campaigned on a promise to continue Lopez Obrador's legacy, a complicated one that is hard to fit into an ideological box. Supporters hail his popular social programs to help the poor. Detractors accuse him of undermining the country's fledgling democracy. Here's the 5 things to know about Sheinbaum. She is Mexico's first female president. Sheinbaum's presidency marks 2 milestones. She's the first female president in Mexico's history, and also the first with Jewish heritage. In the conservative country led by men for more than 2 centuries, Sheinbaum's victory underscores the advances women have made in the political sphere. It is also notable given Mexico's problems with gender-based violence. It has one of the highest rates of murder against women in the world. Sheinbaum says as a president, she would create an anti-femicide prosecutor's office, a measure she implemented when she was mayor of Mexico City, but she has dodged detailing her position on abortion rights, and feminists criticize her campaign for lacking gender-specific policies. Sheinbaum's election is also notable for her Jewish heritage. Her grandparents immigrated to Mexico from Lithuania and Bulgaria. Sheinbaum says she's proud of her ancestry, but also not religiously affiliated. Even so, her ascension is remarkable given that Jews comprise less than 1% of the country, with an overwhelmingly Catholic population, one of the largest in the world. She is a climate scientist. The 62-year-old has a PhD in engineering in the year 1990s, studied at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in Northern California. She is part of the United States Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change team that shared a Nobel Peace Prize with former U.S. Vice President Al Gore in 2007. Sheinbaum started her political career as Lopez Obrador's environmental minister after he was elected Mexico City mayor in 2000. She has been unwaveringly loyal ever since, even as he sidelined green energy projects and championed fossil fuels in the effort to secure energy independence. Sheinbaum's environmental platform marks one of the biggest pivots from Lopez Obrador. It calls for more electric-powered public transit, promoting the use and production of electrical vehicles, and renewable energy production through solar, wind, and hydropower. Notably, Lopez Obrador actively blocked renewable energy projects during his presidency. At the same time, Sheinbaum has lauded one of Lopez Obrador's signature initiatives, a new multi-billion-dollar oil refinery known as Dos Bocas. The project, which Sheinbaum lauded as majestic, is plagued by cost overruns and remains far from fully operational. How Sheinbaum will deal with the refinery remains an open question. She is Lopez Obrador's political protege. Sheinbaum won the presidency in a large part because of his close ties to Lopez Obrador, one of the most popular and divisive figures in Mexican history. Lopez Obrador implemented social programs that helped millions of people rise out of poverty, while also weakening democratic institutions and empowering the military. But while Lopez Obrador is folksy and charismatic, Sheinbaum is seen as analytical and data-driven. The differences were on display during the COVID-19 pandemic. Even as Lopez Obrador downplayed the importance of testing and dove into crowds of people, Sheinbaum expanded Mexico City's testing capacity and urged social distancing. Big picture, Sheinbaum has promised to expand on Lopez Obrador's vision for Mexico. In a sign of their alignment, she named to her cabinet many of Lopez Obrador's confidants, including his finance minister, his public security minister, his former foreign affairs minister, and his current foreign affairs minister. One of the challenges for Sheinbaum will be able to create a political identity that is not directly connected to Lopez Obrador. She has a massive political mandate. Sheinbaum enters office with a massive political mandate. Her political coalition has a supermajority in the lower house of Congress and nearly 2/3 in the Senate. But if Lopez Obrador gave Sheinbaum political clout, he also saddled her with significant challenges. She will also have to address the growing budget deficit fueled by his government spending on social programs, the Dos Bocas oil refinery, and a massive tourist train project. She also confronts a transformed system of governance, One of Lopez Obrador's last major acts as president was to push through a constitutional amendment that would remove all Mexico's 7,000 judges from office. Under the amendment, judges will be elected instead of appointed, a reform Lopez Obrador says is necessary to rid of judiciary corruption and impunity. Critics say the reform erodes checks and balances on presidential power and creates uncertainty in the business world, which in turn caused the Mexico peso to plummet against the dollar. Among Sheinbaum's first tasks as president will be to reassure financial markets while overseeing the implementation of the judicial reform. Sheinbaum's stances on security and migration. During the presidential campaign, polls show that the number one issue for voters in Mexico is security. Organized crime has become so powerful that they're extorting everything from gas stations to avocado growers and trucking companies. Sheinbaum's issue will focus on addressing the root cause of crime and violence, similar to Lopez Obrador. She is also pledged to increase the number of National Guard soldiers and create youth education and job programs. While immigration is a non-issue for voters in Mexico, it is a top concern for voters in U.S. consecutive Republican and Democratic administrations have pressured Mexico to ramp up enforcement and stop migrants from reaching the U.S. southern border. Political analysts say it's likely Sheinbaum will, like Lopez Obrador, work with the U.S. to deter migration, in large part because it's become a powerful cudgel to negotiate on other pressing issues, such as trade agreements. The pipeline of deadly fentanyl into U.S. may be drying up, experts say. This summer, Dan Ciccarone, a physician and street drug researcher at the University of California, San Francisco, sent a team to gather data on the city streets in areas where illicit fentanyl had been a killer for years. They found something unexpected. The fentanyl supply is drying up for some reason, Ciccarone said. Hang out on the streets, talk to people. The drugs are hard to find and more expensive. When street fentanyl began spreading in America's street drug supply beginning in 2012, most experts believe the deadly synthetic opioid was unstoppable. Fentanyl is cheap, easy to make, and hugely profitable. The black market supply chain that feeds U.S. demand for the drug is operated by some of the most sophisticated and ruthless criminal gangs in the world. But Ciccarone said that over the past 6 months, he began hearing from street drug experts around the U.S. who are also seeing significantly less fentanyl and fewer overdoses. I heard from Ohio, I heard from West Virginia, I heard from Maryland and Arizona, and they're all telling me the same thing. Some sort of supply shortage on the streets, he said. There are skeptics, people who question this trend, but some of the top drug policy analysis in the U.S., as well as experts with close ties to street fentanyl markets, believe the data shows a major disruption in the deadly fentanyl supply chain. It is a development that many drug policy experts would not have imagined, said Vanda Philbab Brown at the Brookings Institution, who studies international crime organizations that make and smuggle fentanyl. She said drug gangs appear to be trafficking less fentanyl and are also adulterating or weakening the potency of fentanyl being sold. Everyone has been caught by surprise by the extent of the adulteration of fentanyl, Philbab Brown said, and even more significantly, by claims in certain places in the U.S. there's not enough fentanyl available. Researchers generally agree that there's been an unprecedented drop in fentanyl purity in some parts of the United States. Labs that test street fentanyl are finding it cut or watered down far more aggressively, often with an industrial chemical known as BTMPS. An industrial chemical mixed into fentanyl. We've had samples that are just BTMPS and not any fentanyl, said Nabrun Dasgupta, an addiction researcher based in North Carolina who tests fentanyl samples collected from illicit drug markets around the world. Edward Sisko, a research chemist at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who helped analyze fentanyl samples, said it's a mystery why drug gangs would use BTMPS in fentanyl mixtures. There's no indication that the substance causes users to get high. It's commonly used to prevent UV degradation of plastics, and has some other industrial uses as well, Sisko says, adding that it appears the chemical is being added to fentanyl powders deliberately early in the supply chain, possibly in drug labs in Mexico. When something new comes into the drug market, it usually comes in one geographical location. It is very uncharacteristic to see BTMPS show up all over the country at one time, he said. While BTMPS is considered toxic to humans, it doesn't cause overdoses or immediate death. Some drug policy experts believe the shifts in the fentanyl supply are factors in the sudden national decline in fentanyl-related deaths, which dropped to roughly 20% last year, according to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Dennis Cauchon, a harm reduction activist in Ohio, believes that the pattern is visible in a state where fatal overdoses have fallen even faster in 2024, roughly down to a third. If you look at the share of fentanyl in Ohio's drug supply, you can predict how many deaths there will be, Cauchon said. So the real question is, why has fentanyl declined? The question is being fiercely debated by drug policy and addiction experts. Are Mexican drug cartels and their Chinese partners finally feeling pressure? Some analysts believe international pressures on Chinese companies that make fentanyl precursor chemicals may be a factor. Others think a global crackdown on Mexican drug cartels that smuggle fentanyl into the U.S. is finally affecting the black market supply chain. There were nearly 70,000 pounds of fentanyl seized along the southwest U.S. border in the 24 months ending in August 2024, said Jen Daskal, a deputy assistant to President Biden on the National Security Council who focuses on fentanyl policy. That's more fentanyl seized in the past 2 fiscal years than the prior 5 years combined. Seizures are one part of the strategy. The U.S. has also steadily ramped up direct pressure on the Mexican cartels, attempting to seize fentanyl profits, arresting top Sinaloa leaders, and gaining more cooperation from the Chinese and Mexican governments. Daskal acknowledged that drug deaths remain unacceptably high in the U.S., but then Biden administration fentanyl strategy is showing progress. We're seeing the effects in terms of lives saved. Last year, the cartel seemed to acknowledge the pressure. They issued public promises to curb fentanyl production and smuggling into the United States. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration voiced skepticism about the gesture, calling it a public relations stunt. But for Bob Brown and Brookings now believe some kind of meaningful disruption to U.S. supply may have occurred inside Mexico. She says the cartels may also hope to reduce law enforcement focus on their operations by deliberately weakening the potency of street fentanyl. It could be their decision at the wholesale supply level to be adulterating fentanyl to reduce mortality. If that is the case, that is still a significant accomplishment by U.S. law enforcement, shaping markets and behavior, she said. We need to be real careful about being too optimistic. Not everyone is convinced that the reduction in fentanyl supply on America's streets is meaningful. Dan Salter leads a federal task force targeting drug traffickers in Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Salter told NPR there's a big drop-off on the amount of fentanyl turning up in drug seizures in a part of his U.S. in 2024. We've seized almost 75 kilograms of fentanyl this year so far, he said. In 2023, we seized 216 kilograms. But according to Salter, this is likely a temporary and modest supply disruption that is unlikely to last. I think we need to be real careful about being too optimistic. Rachel Winograd, a drug policy researcher at the University of Missouri St. Louis, is also skeptical that disruptions to the fentanyl pipeline are causing the drop-off in drug deaths, which are down to 34% in Missouri. Drug seizures at the border and elsewhere did really ramp up in 2023, she said, but I do not think that has anything to do with the decrease, at least not here in Missouri. Winograd thinks other factors, including better addiction treatment and the spread of the drug overdose reversal medication Naloxone, are bigger factors in saving lives. Experts agree that the U.S. drug supply remains incredibly toxic and dangerous. Substances being used to adulterate fentanyl, including BT-MPS and Ziazine, a horse tranquilizer that is also known as Tranq, appear to cause fewer fatal overdoses but are still harmful to humans. Frontline harm reduction workers also fear that growing variability in fentanyl purity could put some users at risk as they try to manage their doses. Haven Wheelock, who works on the street for an organization called Outside In Portland, Oregon, said the sudden shift in the fentanyl supply is causing some people experiencing addiction to seek help. Could it be a motivating factor for folks to do something different in terms of seeking treatment? Absolutely. It could also lead to more risky behaviors. Wheelock warned that some people in severe addiction could also wind up injecting fentanyl rather than smoking it, a practice that is considered more dangerous. Cicerone, the street drug researcher in San Francisco, believes an overall drop in fentanyl availability and purity has slowed overdoses in a meaningful way, contributing to a 15% drop in drug deaths in the city so far this year. The only thing that could really explain this is a supply shock, he said. the fentanyl is drying up. Most experts interviewed by NPR agreed the drop in fentanyl supply is significant and widespread, but said it will take months of research and more data to confirm whether the change will have a lasting impact. That is all for today. Thank you so much for watching.